guys, The Curious Owl here, and today I will be going over all of the 5-star reads I had in 2022. So if you did not watch my lowest rated in DNFs video for 2022, I will leave that video in the description for you guys to go check out. But this video is going to go over all of the books that I absolutely loved this year that I really just enjoyed so much, and talking about like in terms of the stats of this year with all of the books I read or attempted to read, how many of those were 5-star reads. So I'm going to basically go month by month and tell you guys how many 5-star reads I had and which ones they were. In January, I had 4 5-star reads. The first 2 volumes of the Critical Role Vox Machina Origins series, which were volumes 1 and 2. And then I also had the Critical Role Vox Machina story of Kith and Kin by Marieke Nijkamp as a 5-star. And I also had reread The Hating Game in January, which also then got a 5-star. In February, I had no 5-star reads. In March, I had 5 5-star reads, being the first volume of Attack on Titan Volume 1. I have since unhauled the entirety of this collection because I found out some really disturbing information about some of the later volumes, and I want to make it known that basically it's very much kind of I don't know if racism is typically the right word, but there's some kind of like borderline like attacking of a very particular group of people within the volumes of this series. And while I really loved how the first one began, I decided I did not want to read the rest of it. It wasn't worth my time, and it really wasn't anything that I was going to feel like I was going to miss out on entirely. The second 5-star read that I had, though, that I did end up keeping was They Went Left by Monica Hess. And then I read for the first time this year Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Iyemide. And then I did a reread of Renegades by Marissa Meyer. And then the last book in March I ended up giving a 5-star was The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. In April, I had 1 5-star read, and that was Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer. This was also a reread, though. In May, I had 4 5-star reads. The first book I had read in May that was a 5-star was Everlasting Nora by Marie Miranda Cruz. This was a middle grade story that I found so endearing and was so beautifully done. And honestly, for a middle grade, was a little violent, and I was kind of surprised, but was very, very fun to read. Then the second one I read was the first volume of Haikyuu. Absolutely loved this, was such a fun time. Then I read a short story by Dean Koontz called Darkness Under the Sun, which apparently is some kind of a prequel short story to a series that he had written. I've since decided not to read Dean Koontz because I've heard a lot of people say that he has some of the similar issues to Stephen King, and I'm just not really feeling like I'm missing out on much. I did really like this short story, though, and I thought it was very fun. I also gave a 5 out of 5 stars to a short story by Leigh Bardugo, which was called The Witch of Duva, which is part of the Grishaverse world. In June, I had 3 5-star reads. The first of which being The Hero of Ages, which is the final book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. One of the best endings to an entire series I could have ever asked for. Then I also read the final book in the Renegades trilogy, which was Supernova. Absolutely loved this. Another ending that I found to be absolutely perfect to a series. And then the last book was a short story by Brandon Sanderson called Allomancer Jack and the Pits of Altania, which is part of the Mistborn world. In July, I had 4 5-star reads. First of which being A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This one was so good. I really loved this series, and I was so happy to have read this series in 2022. It is probably my most proud accomplishment I think I read, was reading the entire series to date, and this was just so much fun and so steamy and so bloody, and I just loved every second of it. Then the next story I read was another short story by Brandon Sanderson. This one was called The Hope of Elantris, which was placed in the world of Elantris. My other 5-star read in July was Bedazzled by Ryan LaSala. This was every cosplayer's dream of like a convention, and like Project Runway thrown into it. It was just so much fun. I had so much fun reading it, and definitely would like to be able to reread in the future because it was just chef's kiss. Amazing, beautiful, highly recommend. And then the last book in July that I read that was a 5-star was A Court of Wings and Ruin. I do think this is my favorite out of the entire series, but it's so hard to pick between this and A Court of Mist and Fury. And it's just, this was so beautifully done, and I love the way that the overall story ended, and I'm very excited to see more in the series because A Court of Silver Flames, although did not get a 5-star for me, was so well done that I'm very excited to see more come out of this world. In August, I think I had my most 5 stars in the entire year with a total of 7, first of which was the first issue of Volume 3 of the Critical Role Vox Machina Origins graphic novel series. Absolutely loved it. Everything to do with Critical Role, I'm going to give a 5-star because it's beautifully done. Then I also read Black Girls Must Die Exhausted by Jane Allen. This was a really hard-hitting contemporary story that I was blown away by, and I'm very excited to continue reading more of Jane Allen's work. Then I read Descender Volume 3 by Dustin Nguyen and Jeff Lemire. Really well done installment of this series. I was blown away, kind of going into some of the origin stories of several of the characters in this world, and I really, really enjoyed it. The next one was The Final Strike by Sarah El Arifi. This has got to be in my top 5 for favorite books of the year because it was so beautifully done for a debut fantasy novel by a person of color. And I just think that there's so much to be explored in this world that I'm so excited to see the next book come out sometime next year. And I read Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This is by far my favorite standalone, or at least first book in a series by Brandon, because this is going to end up having a sequel to it, but it was originally just a standalone. Very well done, very fun, Mistborn feeling kind of story that I think was really what put this over the top for me. I also reread for a second time this year, The Hating Game. And then one of my favorites, again, I think in that top 5, is Extasia by Claire Legrand. This was absolutely amazing. It was jam-packed with action, witchiness, deceit, betrayal, so many different things. And like I remember when I first read it, I was like, this is perfect for any person that has watched the Village movie by M. Night Shyamalan, because this is very much a similar vibe. It was so well done, and I need to now read what Claire has written in terms of fantasy, because if she can write something fantastical and creepy, I can't even begin to imagine how her fantasy must be. In September, I had 4 5-star reads, the first of which being Ophelia After All by Raquel Marie. This was so beautifully done. I think that this book really portrayed a lot of things about questioning your sexual identity so well that I related so much to it as a person, especially when it came to realizing my feelings I had for female friends that I had growing up and what that experience was like, especially in high school. And this was just so beautifully done. I would love to read more of Raquel's writing because it felt so real, and it really felt like I was actually watching a real life friend of mine going through this entire experience. And I just absolutely loved it, and I was gushing over it when I first read it. Then I also give a 5-star to the second issue of Volume 3 of the Critical Role Vox Machina Origins. I also gave it 5 out of 5 stars to Jennette McCurdy's memoir that was released this year, which was I'm Glad My Mom Died. Super hard-hitting. I learned so much more about Jennette as a person in terms of like what had actually gone on over the course of her career, and I really felt for her. And then, to probably nobody's surprise, I ended up giving Babel by R.F. Kuang a 5 out of 5 stars. This is my number 1 favorite read of the entire year. This was the best book I read this entire year. Nobody is going to sway my judgment on that because I just adored this book. I have literally been waiting for this book since Rebecca had talked about it when she was in the process of working on the Dragon Republic in the Poppy War series. I've been following her since that point and have been waiting for this book to come out, and to know that it hit every single expectation I had and then some, and blew my mind out of the water with that ending. Oh my God, I am never going to ever get over this book. It is so fucking good, and if you have not read it and are a fan of Dark Academia, you need to read this. It is so well done. And then go read R.F. Kuang's other books because they're just as good. And I cannot wait for their next one to come out in May of 2023. I'm so fucking excited. In October, I had 5 5-star reads in the month. The first of which being The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. This was my first Aiden Thomas book, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the world. I loved magic. I loved the twists at the end. It was just, so well done. I'm so excited for book 2, and I really want to go back and read Cemetery Boys because if I liked this one, I think I'm going to really enjoy that one. Then I read The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is my favorite Tiffany D. Jackson book, and I think is also in that top 5 in terms of my favorite reads because it was so beautifully done. This is a retelling of Carrie by Stephen King, and I think this is better than the original. Like, don't even ever read Carrie by itself. Just read this and you're set because you're going to know basically everything there is to know about what is going on in Carrie. But this is taking it a step further with talking about racism, and especially in small towns, and how viral some things become and how damaging that can be for somebody, especially when they've done something bad that's gone viral. It's just, chef's kiss, amazing. I will never, ever go anywhere without thinking about this book. It was so well done. Then I read Ace of Spades for the second time this year. I still loved it after the first time, and it was just absolutely amazing to read it, you know, towards the beginning of the year and then once again at the end of the year. Then I read Nana by Brandon Massey, which I was not expecting to like as much as I did, but I was really surprised by how devious this book was and how creepy it felt. Then I read A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Murder, which was the third book in the Countess of Harley mysteries by Diane Freeman, a series that I did not think I was going to really enjoy, but this was my favorite book out of the entire series. It was so fun, and this one, the only reason it's the favorite is because all of the books, except for this one, felt like I couldn't quite get the full understanding of what exactly happened in terms of why the person did what they did, all these things. But this book had that for me, and that was why it was my favorite out of the entire series. Then in November, I had 2 5-star reads, which the first was Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. This was one of my most anticipated reads of the entire year, and I loved this so much. I think this is definitely going to be also in that top 5 because I just loved every second of this. The writing was so beautifully done. The relationship that was brought into this was so beautifully done, and the incorporation of the title, you know, Yerba Buena, in terms of it, how it was used in this story was so beautifully crafted, and it talks so much about grief and longing and things that I remember loving about Nina's other book, We Are Okay. It is just astounding the hold that this woman has on my throat. And then the other book I read that was a 5-star in November was Lake Lore by Anna Marie McLemore. This also had some very beautiful writing, but I just loved the story of these 2 non-binary characters and how they interacted with each other and how the entire story wasn't dedicated just to a romantic aspect. Like, it was really a story about friendship and a story about finding yourself and coming to terms with some of your differences from other people and how those differences about you from other people do not hinder you. They are not the only parts of your identity, and there's more to you than just anything like a disability. Then in December, the only thing that I read that was a 5-star was The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. This I related to so much. In that top 5, this is taking that final top 5 spot because of the fact that this hit so much harder than I was expecting it for me personally, because this involved a lot of things about my family culture that I did not know about. I've talked about this a couple of times, but for those of you that don't know, my mother's side of the family has Native heritage, specifically Chippewa, which is the tribe that is talked about in this book. Because for one, it's placed in the state of Michigan, which is my home state, where I've grown up pretty much my entire life. And secondly, it involves my family tribe that I have really no connection to. So I got to learn so many different like traditional cultural things that they would do in terms of, you know, healing people, some like superstitions that they had, things about the community, issues surrounding around being half Native and even less than that, and how hard it is to become a part of the tribe fully because of the fact that you don't have pure Native blood, and so many other things also involving in the story specifically, the rise in drug usage on the reservations and how damaging it is for communities and how difficult it is to get that stuff out because it's brought in by white people. It is brought in by white people to the reservation and screws everything up. The whole story from beginning to end is so informational and so eye-opening for somebody that, you know, has wanted to learn more about their heritage. And with this story, like, I don't know everything there is to know about being a Chippewa Native American, but at the very least, it makes me more willing to go and find that information myself and learn about these things with my grandmother with the time that I have left with her, because she wants to know. She did not get any of the information she probably should have from her family, and I think we both deserve that. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and tally up all of the 5 stars I had this year and figure out of how many books I at least attempted or completely finished this year that were 5 stars. So out of all of the books I read or attempted to read this year, which was 120, 42 of the books I read were 5 stars, which is already almost 3 times what my low rated or DNF books were, because I had 15 of those. So yeah, like I had almost 3 times as many 5 stars as I did low ratings or DNFs, which is very interesting. And all I can say is that I know for a fact, just purely based on rudimentary math, that is over 33% of my reads this year were 5 stars. So over a third of the books that I read this year were a 5 star, which that's a pretty good average considering the fact that I didn't count anything that was also 4 stars. Like if I was to have counted all 4 stars within this, it probably would have been a lot higher of a percentage, but just looking at 5 stars by itself, that's not a bad average to have over a third of my reads be a 5 star. It's looking like I'm pretty good with finding what I like. It's just every so often I do tend to find something that I'm not enjoying as much. But let me know how you guys did in terms of your 5-star reads. Did you have a lot this year? Did you not? Did you find a lot of good things? Let me know how things were for you in the year of 2022. But that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys.